And I'm like, y'all know what to do. Stop acting crazy. So, but it's great because they're like, yes, we'll go out and do it. And then they just come in and check in with me and so it gives me the ability to not have to worry about the white people and actually get the focus on the Black people. And so I'm excited about that. So I'm doing well.
I like that. Pastor Curtis, how about you, sir?
Doing pretty good, doing pretty well. Don't have much words to say, but all is well.
I got a chance to see Pastor Curtis briefly the other day, and it was interesting. As I was describing the exchange to my husband, he said people are still hanging out where they were. He was standing outside of my car waiting on an exchange to happen between the two of us. And the teller where we were was like all on super alarm. Can I help you, sir? Can I help you? And I said, does his Blackness offend? Yes, we're still in that moment. Oh, good. Bryson, how about you, sir?
I'm doing good. You all know I have a little one. And so I feel like my level of rest and energy, it hasn't been the same for a few months, but it's sort of a new normal. You know what I mean? Right. So I'm feeling good though. Glad to be on the call with you all to chop it up. I'm doing all right.
Yeah, I'm coming into the space, the same thing. I find that I have to steal moments of peace from, and what I mean is from the norm of our current day norm. And so I have to step away and create options for myself. Other than that, this moment will swallow you up. But it's an exciting moment. It's an exciting, we are making history for sure. I've been telling so many circles that I was in that we were creating for such a time as this. Right? As busy as it is.
We are live so that you all know, and I want to make sure that if you are using mobile devices, because I've tagged you in, that you turn those devices down. Pastor Trina?
Yeah, I was just saying that I believe we were created for such a time as this. And so we, with everything that's going on, we wake up every day. I'm asking God, give me grace to get through this day and to show up on time where you've appointed me to be, right? In every conversation, in every exchange. I started out dreading it, like, oh, another day. And I had to realign myself to say, there's a whole lot of points of history that I could have been plopped into, created into. And you know what? I decided none of them were fitting for me. I didn't want to do the slavery days, didn't want to do civil rights, didn't want to do Jim Crow, but we're still dealing with a semblance of that anyway. This is the time I was created for. So being pulled on in 1,000 different directions, being assaulted still, from my mental capabilities, from physical, just kind of slights, if you would. It's like, no, we were created for this time. And I'd just like to start out with that kind of thought process too. And then Tony, you'll take it from here. But do you agree that this is the time we were created for? Think about it. We can go kicking and screaming, or we can say, wait a minute, God, you do stand outside of time. And you had me here now.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to lean into this time. Yeah.
That's what that realization that I'm built for this moment. And I hear you. I'm like, nah, slavery, I'm cool on that. To be able to do this, to be able to be fighting in this sort of long arc of social justice and history, in the moment after we've had a Black president in the United States. In other words, we get to fight from a place of freedom, a different place of freedom. And we're really just trying to help a lot of our Black sisters and brothers go, hey, we's free, right? We can fight because we's free.
Oh my God.
It's an experience, like a lot of our, our foremothers and fathers and uncles and aunties just didn't get that opportunity. So thank you for that, Pastor Trina.
I think that I see Pastor Kelvin Ward coming in, and so we'll wait for his video part to kick in. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and move forward, and then he'll come up when he comes up. So First of all, I want you all to know I am like so rock star excited. This was one of the very first top anti-Black conversations that I envisioned and imagined, in my mind when listing it out. And so to have you all in this space, I was nervous. Mama Trina, ooh, I was nervous. I was like, oh my God, because the reverence, the respect, the reverence for God that I have. So let me start there, because I never want people to think that I revere people over Abba Father.
Okay.
So the reverence that I have for God and the God that I see resonate and exude through each of you individuals that is on this panel, in the work that you do, in the way that you speak and entreat the community, and I'm not talking about from a place of perfection,
Right.
but from a place of sincerity, from a place of surrender, a place of saying, okay, God, if you can use anything, you can use me. And so I'm gonna sacrifice and do whatever it is that I need to do, and I'll just keep trying to get it right as I'm going. So just that space, that really excites me, to be able to share this space. I wanted to, first, what I want to do is just kind of frame what Anti-Black Conversations is. Anti-Black Conversations is a space, it's something that that I get to, I guess, found, or whatever you want to call, that is a space where we have dialogue that is with the people, led by the people, for the people. And so typically in anti-Black conversation spaces, you're going to see a variety of people, a variety of faces, a variety of voices. It's not any one voice that will lead anti-Black conversation spaces, because we are not just a singular people, that can be carbon copied. One person can't speak for all Black voices. What I was learning and what I've been learning as I've been doing some reading, studying, sitting and mentoring at people's feet, is that anti-Blackness has been the lens in which I look at myself and see myself in the mirror. When I look at a reflection of Tony, I look at my reflection in the mirror and I say, oh, I hate that. I need to change that. I wish I didn't look like that. I hate when I do this. Oh man, I should do this better, And so the way that I perceive myself, view myself, self-talk, all of these things that I contend with when it comes to self-loathing, self-hatred, perfectionism, all these different things, is very, very much so impacted by anti-Blackness. It is very much so has been affected by racism and by white supremacy. And so realizing then that it's very difficult for people of color to actually fully embrace who they are, embrace any promises that God has even made to them, embrace their purpose, and move forward without addressing anti-Blackness and changing the lens of anti-Blackness, the way they see themselves. So every conversation that we have, we lift up that this is about changing the way we see ourselves. And sometimes you have to address it just by addressing some of the truth in it. And so this conversation is about anti-Blackness in the church. And so keeping that in mind, anti-Blackness in the church, how has anti-Blackness impacted the church? How is the church seen through the lens of anti-Blackness? How do we see and even experience relationship with God, through the lens and the framing and the conditioning of white supremacy, racism, and anti-Blackness? And so this is going to be a deep dive and a deep dialogue, and y'all the right ones for it. So what we're going to do is go around and because you are all clergy and pastors, I know Lady Trina, you know how to share the mic and stuff. If it was Bishop, I would tell him that same thing though. Y'all have this time limit. So I don't do this typically with everybody, but with y'all, I gotta say, y'all pastors, give a pastor a mic, they gonna preach a sermon. So here's what we're gonna do. I would like for you all to exercise the discipline of, anywhere in between 3 to 5 minute responses, unless it just gets really deep, and then I'll just cut you off if I need to. but I'm gonna do it in love and respect. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so I want you guys just to go around and let's introduce ourselves. Pastor Kelvin, it's good to see you. Who are you? Where are you from? And how you doing today?
Hi, it was good to see you too, Elder Tony, and everyone that's on the call. I'm driving, so excuse me for a moment till I get to my residence. Who am I? I am Alice Ruth Ward's baby boy. I say that because I never knew my father. I was raised by a strong, spiritual, Black woman that sung most of the solos in the choir at Second Missionary Baptist Church in the city of Riverside, California. Grew up right across the street from the church, so she made no excuses for us relative to making sure that we got to church on Sunday. And so I'm 54 years old. I tell everybody for 53 years and probably 6 months I've been in the church. It's really all I know. But on the other side, I was cleaning my bathroom this morning, wiping it down with a white paper towel. And when I looked at the paper towel before I put it in the trash can, it was dirty. And so that's me. I wake up in the morning, I got new mercies, but throughout the day, I get some dirt on me. So being that I've been in the church 53 years, like I said, in 6 months, I'm still this dude that's trying to draw closer to God as he draws closer to me. Community organizer with ICUC Inland Congregations United for Change in the city of San Bernardino, and I serve as the associate pastor of ministries at Cathedral of Praise International Ministries in the city of San Bernardino under the leadership of Bishop Craig W. Johnson, and that's about it.
That was a perfect example of an example of a preached introduction. All right. Let's see. Lady Trina, Pastor Trina. Who are you?
Yep. I am first and foremost someone that is still deeply in love with God and the church. And I say that first and foremost because I feel that it's an important place to start, not just for this conversation, but for the time that we're in. I'm still very much appreciative of the one that I still hold dear in truth that created me to be all of who I am. And I'm not at fault with him for how we've interpreted his intent. I'm still deeply in love with God. I'm a wife of 43 years to an amazing husband, feeling just very sad, sorrowful for all of the women that still can't find a good Black man, because I did. I was blessed to do so, and he is absolutely fulfilling all of my needs. I'm a kept woman. Everything that I choose to do, I do because, and Tony, you know that to be the truth. I choose to do because I get to, I can, but I'm grateful for him for caring for all of my needs, actually. I have two adult children that are amazing, paving their way in this life, and a son-in-law that is the next best thing to my husband, that is taking excellent care of my daughter, had to be that way, and 7 amazing grandbabies. And so you may see a couple of them run in and out. But that's who I am. I'm on pastoral staff at Victory and Praise Church. And my husband and I started that church back in 1995 with just our family. It has grown to over 600. We're currently now with a couple of moves and what have you, at about 400, a little bit under 400. But out of that ministry, we birthed several other churches, and some then came under my husband's leadership as well. So we've about 12 churches now, which is Visionaries Pursuing Excellence, non-denominational organization. And I'm the executive director for Faith in the Valley. So I'm excited about that. Faith in the Valley spans over 5 counties from San Joaquin County to Kern County. And we're working for the economic justice and dignity of all people, predominantly those that have been disenfranchised by systems and structures, but teaching people basically and learning from people, but teaching people how to use their own voice to bring about policy change. And let's see, Faith in the Valley. I came by way of AT&T for 25 years. I spent in the corporate world. So coming over to nonprofits, doing social justice work was a kind of a shift for me, but I am certainly seeing the call on my life to be able to serve in that manner.
Man, y'all are some heavily credentialed individuals. Okay, let me see. I mean, for real, like, so when you guys walk in the room, you walk in the room with some serious portfolios and experience behind you. Bryson, who are you? Who's Bryson?
Who is Bryson? Yeah, I'm the son of Paul and Sheila White, the grandson of Chester Riggins and Lillian Riggins, Bishop Thomas Butler. I try to root myself, my understanding of myself in relationship. I'm the last of 6 kids, so I'm the baby of the bunch. I'm the husband of Jennifer and the father of Kairos, who's a really cool 9-month-old bundle of joy, who's keeping us tired but keeping our hearts warm at the same time. I'm the regional faith leadership coordinator for Faith in the Valley. Came in April. I was a community organizer with what was then Faith and Community from 2011 to 2016. Then I transitioned to Chicago to a PhD program at Garrett Seminary, theology and ethics, and my work explores the intersection of theology, anti-Blackness, and mass incarceration. And my advisor is Dr. Stephen Ray. That's been a real journey. It's been a really journey of discipline and inward discovery, as I've been learning so much about the history of social movements, the histories of incarceration, different theologies, liberation, etc. It's been a really good journey. I'm writing my dissertation right now. I got the 2nd chapter that's in draft form that I'm about to send out. And so I'm glad to be on the call with you all. I've been I think there's so much to say, I guess, about myself. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find words around my own sort of journey and self-discovery. But I think if I was to define myself, I'm a person who believes that radical relationship will change the world, and not in an evangelical sense that doesn't believe in structural change, but in the connection of rooted radically within one with another in communal relationship as we move towards structural change. And so, so thank you for having me on. I look forward to chopping it up some more.
Edwin. I think, Edwin, I'm going to save you for last because you're the furthest in distance. Pastor Curtis, introduce yourself, and then I'm going to save Edwin for last.
All right. I am Pastor Curtis Smith. I am a resident, born here in Stockton, California, but raised around the way, born to 2 teenage parents who were basically very new in their early teens and gave up, their teenage life to raise me, their son. My father went into the military upon graduation, so that afforded me a round the world education and experience from Nebraska to graduating from high school in England and returning back to Stockton to go to University of the Pacific. I come from the music industry. That was my first go-round career, and then into the government Internal Revenue Service, and then into full-time ministry. Imagine that. I think I've heard that story before, of tax collector into ministry. And then into the world of community organizing, which has been an 18-year journey now. And I've been 3 years on staff with Faith in the Valley as the director of faith leadership. And as far as, who I am the husband of a wonderful wife, Kristen Lucas Smith, and I am the father of the 5th generation of Curtis Joshua Smith. And I am, I should say, a very, I'm pastor of Destiny Christian Center here in Stockton. And I would classify myself in this moment in time as a concerned pastor. I think of a quote of Dr. King that said, there can be no deep disappointment where there is no deep love. And so there's a concern I have for us as a church, even in the point of, no lack of love is my deep love that gives it is concern. And that's kind of like, I should say in a nutshell of who I am in this moment and who I represent in this space.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like that quote. Edwin, who is Edwin? What brings you into this space?
Hey, family. Well, first, I'm just happy to be here all the way in Dallas, Texas. Thank God sometimes for these moments, right, that can create spaces that we probably would have never even thought to come up with on our own. So this is going to be fun hanging out with my fam from Cali, from the West Coast. Who am I? I am a kid who I'm transitioning from being a kid who was on the run to a man with some roots. And that's an interesting transition for me. I am the son of Reverend Priscilla Janet Lancaster. I am the son of Edward Thomas Robinson, who is deceased. I am, interestingly, have all these brothers and sisters, but I'm still an only child. My mother had children before she married my father, who had children, and then I showed up.
Wow.
And so I've had a Joseph-like existence to some degree throughout my life. But my family loved me, right? They didn't hate me or despise me, but they loved me. I was in the Army. I went to Iraq twice. So I served in the United States Army. I finished my undergrad at Eastern University. Excuse me, not Eastern University of Mary Hardin Baylor. I went to Eastern University. I finished my master's degree at Duke Divinity School. And then I started being a pastor on staff at a church here in Dallas. Transitioned from that. Well, I didn't transition, I was fired. Fired from that to then help found Faith in Texas. And then I got fired from that. And then people kept trying to hire me for things, but no one would hire me. So I just started my own stuff. And so now I'm the founder of, one of the founders of Dallas Black Clergy for Safety, Equity, and Justice, also a political consultant, as well as founder of Marathon Economic Development Group. And so we're just really happy that we're getting to work with Black people for Black people in the state, in Dallas, and hopefully to change the state of Texas.
Okay. So I'm not even going to spend a whole bunch on me. I'm Tony. I am a woman of faith. I'm a woman of color. I'm a resident, a native of Stockton, California. Single mother, raised 4 amazing rock star children that spoil me rotten. Have yet to find that man that's going to treat me like my bishop has set an example that I should be treated. And so the bar is pretty high because Lady Trina is mama spiritually for me. And so I'm like, well, shoot, he better open my doors and make sure that I got what I want. And I want to make sure that when we walk into the lobby of a hotel, he can already check the temperature and know, let's go back and get in the car and find another place to stay because she's a little bit too, not for this one. So all that being said, I am not discouraged. He coming, Lady Trina, he coming. He just has to go through some more refining in order for him to be prepared and ready. But with all of that, I am definitely an organizer, born, bled, and bred. It is in my DNA, advocate for the people for sure, on every level. And I love the people. I love people passionately, deeply, intimately, fiercely. So as you all were introducing yourselves, and I very much so flow, and I flow heavily, just in leading of the Spirit of God, and what it is that I think, say, and do. And so as you all each were introducing yourselves, what I see sitting amongst, find myself sitting in the midst of, are examples of leadership, examples of success. And so I think that the first thing that I want to ask of you is, how did you have to overcome anti-Blackness to get where you are today as men and women of faith? And I know that that wasn't like, it's just that there are people that are looking, and you guys have a laundry list of an example of things that you have achieved and accomplished. And a lot of people today don't even feel like they can make it, Pastor Trina, that they can achieve what it is and still have faith and still believe. How did anti-Blackness, what did you have to combat with anti-Blackness, Edwin, to get where you are today? Yeah, we started with you.
Oh, okay. Wow. So maybe the first thing if I can just say how I see anti-Blackness before
Yes.
I answer that question, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I see anti-Blackness as about the human condition, in a different way than I see like anti-racism or racism, right? Racism is fundamentally, in my understanding, about the systems and structures that have been created to maintain, right, these ideas of anti-Blackness, right, and all this sorts of things. And so anti-Blackness is really just about you hating, or someone hating or despising, or even me hating or despising, the fact of the reality of my own humanity, of being Black, and what all that means. And so I would say the first, like, overcoming anti-Blackness as a Black man, a Black child in America, is fundamentally struggling at every point in your life to actually get to know who you are as a Black person, because nothing in society is set up to tell me who I am or to give it to me. I have no choice but to become an explorer if I want to find out what it means to be Black. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why everything around me is Black at this point in my life. From my pictures on my wall to whatever it is, because I didn't get the luxury that our white sisters and brothers get, or some of my Black sisters and brothers who are in grow up in different spaces of always being told who you are as a Black person. And what does that mean in society? And that's just because it's not there. It's not easily accessible. You have to dig for it and mine for it. And so I would say, so every step along the way, every time I got fired, it had something to do with my Blackness. Whether that person, and these were Black people, mm-hmm. sometimes, right? Because it was me exercising the power, the creativity, and the ingenuity that is Blackness, that's always been Blackness. And that pushes against systems and structures that were created by whiteness. That's kind of esoteric, and maybe I hit the big so everybody else can get a little more specific, because there's more of us on here. But I would say that maybe it's really just, as a Black man in America, I just simply have to say, like, literally my very existence, every step along the way has been a struggle just to find out who I am as a Black man. And then when my faith is given to me and told me to shut out other spaces where Black people are telling me how to be a Black man, like the Nation of Islam or Judaism or other spaces, it makes it even harder for me to find out who I am as a Black man. And so I would, that's what I would say.
Wow. Because it's this conversation, I don't want people to feel like, you know, Bryson, I seen you resonating deeply. So
Yeah, I felt that one. When I think about anti-blackness, I had to overcome. I start off like early in some of my earliest memories of my own self, right? You know, before I knew what structural racism was, the ways in which anti-blackness, I had already ingested it as a boy. And I remember, you know, this is really sort of a foundational story for me. I remember when I was a boy, I was about 4. It was one of my earliest memories. Me and my brother went down the street to a garage sale, and my brother Brandon, he bought a poster of Kentucky Fried Chicken because he was always, it's just funny. He was just kind of like a, you know, he saw the poster. He was like, I like chicken. He was like 6, you know what I mean? So he got it, right? I was a Jesus fanatic from like my earliest memories. So I bought a picture of the Warner Solomon portrait of Jesus, you know, the classic portrait of Jesus, the super white Jesus with the curly hair, you know, the long, not curly hair, the long blonde and sort of flowing hair. I take it back to the house. I'm super proud of myself. I think, you know, I'm being a good Christian and all this good stuff. And I give it to my dad. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know, Dad, can you hang this up in my room? You know what I'm saying? Right? You know what I mean? And, my dad was like, all right, you know what I'm saying? So he hung it up, right? And then he kind of looked at me and then he walked out. The next day we were driving. I don't know where we were driving. And my dad was like, he said, you know, son, I want to talk to you about something. He said, you know, Jesus isn't white. I was 4 and I got mad at him. And my dad, like the way I trusted my dad to the max, my dad was super involved in my life. I got mad at him. I said, what are you talking about? Jesus isn't white. You know, all the pictures that I've seen are him being white. And I remember as a little boy thinking, I mean, I didn't have the language of, you know, heresy and, you know, sacrilegious and all these kind of different things. But I remember thinking that he was what I would say now like heretical and against God because he was saying that Jesus was not white, right? And so you know, I was talking to him and I was kind of trying to debate him. My dad was like, whatever, man. He was like, he said, you know what, son? He said, one day you'll know what I'm talking about. And so that was really sort of the beginning journey of my life of the beginning process of unsettling anti-blackness that I had already ingested. I didn't get it from like my home, like my parents weren't hanging, you know, talking about white Jesus, but in my church, which I love to the max, everybody had portraits of white Jesus, right? And so at an early age, I already did not see myself as being able to be depicted as divine, right? I had already associated divine humanity, divine expressions of humanity with whiteness, and Black bodies as hellbound bodies, as degraded bodies, as a 4-year-old, without anyone at that point ever explicitly telling me that. That's how pervasive it is in our society. Then I had several, I don't have a lot of time, but I had several, incidents of racism throughout my life. You know what I'm saying? From individual confrontations from teachers and students at school, to police officers, you know what I mean, to not being invested in by institutions when I was equal to or more smart than my white counterparts, you know what I mean? So I've had those sort of pieces. And I've also been deeply invested from professors they were Black professors, you know what I'm saying, mainly. But I think I wanted to begin my comments and my contribution with the way in which anti-Blackness was sort of, I have to overcome. I ingested in myself at my earliest stage of development, and to be honest, I'm still unsettling and getting that out of me. I haven't arrived at some place where I'm completely devoid of anti-Blackness. You know what I mean? I have to still get that out of me because it's so pervasive in our society and it was so deeply ingrained into me. So I'm still on my journey.
Can I ask you a very quick clarifying question then? It was something that you said, you're 4 years old. And so you're saying that by 4 years old, that there is already somewhere in your subconscious, in your psyche, in your being, that differentiates um, uh, 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 a love of God that is maybe stronger towards those that is white than someone that is Black, or the going to heaven, that it might be, say, easier. And this is just me breaking it down.
Yeah.
Easier for someone who is white than someone who is Black, or is it deeper than that? Or
Well, I wouldn't say at that early age that I had made the association. I mean, I kind of read a little bit back into the story. So I wouldn't say that at that time that I had associated who was going to heaven or hell, but I definitely concretely associated me not being divine, right? That God is white and whiteness is what is divine. I think the hell-bounded portions of that came more so through my experience within white evangelicalism in my college years. You know what I mean? Where I sort of was explicitly ingesting those types of logics. But you know, I think, you know, that early phase was more so, you know, me not being able to see that Blackness is a part of God's divine order. Yeah.
yeah,
Black bodies, I should say.
yeah. Pastor Curtis or Pastor Trina?
Yeah, I was really appreciative for the conversation, because I was thinking, as Bryson was talking, he used pervasiveness and talking about the structural racism, and listening even as Edwin was speaking and what have you. I'm thinking of the intentionality and the enormous depth and breadth of anti-Blackness and structural racism, and how it's so prevalent in every part of society. And talking about still trying to get anti-Blackness out of me, still learning about it, a very long journey. So as you were speaking, I was thinking about kind of my journey coming through corporate world and what have you. And some of my mom and dad my dad was a police officer, assassinated, I won't say killed in the line of duty, assassinated at his office at Hunters Point in San Francisco in the 60s. So you could read that one way as a child. And then of course, now learning even today, some of the things that I am, Black officer in San Francisco in the 60s, I can just now realize the enormity of the pressure and the tension and the racial, unrest that was going on there. And the fact that he was shot 12 times in his office in San Francisco, and they could not find anyone who did it, and they didn't arrest anyone, from it. He didn't die there. He lived a month later before he died, actually, eventually of pneumonia. But coming through that as a background, a lot of attention, I'm thinking about the intentionality of structural racism. There was then, of course, the overwhelming support for the family. My mom left with 4 children. I'm the youngest of 4. And the what felt like then surrounding and love of the institution, right? So looking back on it, it's like it's probably some of the same ones that were involved in, the assassination, because I can recall attempts where there are, or attacks where there was sugar put in his gas tank, and the phone calls and different things that happened. That I was 7 when my dad was killed. That as a kid looked one way and you discounted some things. Now take that through life, right? So because of that, there was some funding that occurred. My mom was able to stay home and raise us. I was sought in high school, a couple of different things. I want to get to a point, getting all the way through to my career at ATT, because the structural racism part had me, the way it played out in my life, had me thinking that I was an anomaly. I was different. You're Black, but you're different. I started working graduated early high school, January, didn't go to college. I was sought out at my high school to come and work in this program for the telephone company based on grades and what have you. And so I started working at 17 for the telephone company with full benefits, full everything. And because of the grace of God, I want to pivot back and forth between, and I'm not confused at all that it was God leading me through this path, but also didn't at the time recognize how I was also a pawn in a system, because promoted quickly into management, probably by the time I was 19 or 20 years old, and the entire career, lots of promotions. Most of the spaces I was in was predominantly white males, no other women, no other Blacks, male or female, no other minorities. And I can recall sitting in spaces terrified. I'd be in offices where they'd have all these degrees on the wall and all of these old white men, and they talked in a vernacular that I couldn't necessarily understand. But because I knew God and because of his grace and his plan for me in his life, I'd hear concepts, and I'd be sitting there like, oh my, what I always felt like, why am I here? What am I doing here? Is what the enemy would plant in my mind. The structure would say, you're one of a kind, you're different, you're special. And there's not many like you, right? And for sure, I'd look around and wouldn't see any other like me, and I would buy into that, right? And so from there, concepts would be displayed, and I'd be thinking, I don't know what in the world they're saying, and God for sure would give me exactly what the answer was, what they were talking about, and I'd be terrified to say it out loud, because with all of these degrees around the table, that can't be the answer, that can't be the solution for what we're. And I would muster up my most my bravest voice, and I would try to say, this is what I think we should do. And they'd all look at me and be like, say it again. And inside, immediately, I'd be like, that was stupid. That was dumb. That's not the right answer. It's too simplified. And I'd try to say it again, and they'd be like, oh, okay, that's what we're going to do. And within the span of about a year, it was someone else's ideal, not necessarily mine, right? And so a lot of that, a lot of, owning. And so, but I went through a career because of that. They would keep me in places. I would receive, for sure, the promotions, the money, some commendations, but for the most part, a lot of the things that I talked about, presented, et cetera, would be owned by someone else eventually, but they kept me around. Now, I enjoyed the career. I learned a lot of discipline from it. I learned a lot of drive. I learned a lot there that I needed now, and I had no clue of the now that I was eventually going to be. I went through those years enjoying it, learning how to navigate the spaces, learning how to be in the white spaces, but also hearing and embracing a lot of racist ideas that I did not recognize as racist. After coming out of the telephone companies and all of the iteration as Pacific Telephone, Pacific Bell, AT&T, SBC, all of those, after 25 years, when my husband started a ministry and I started working for the church, still, here's what it did. Like that picture you picked up, no one said to me directly, Black is wrong, Black is bad, Black is ignorant, Black can't do, they can't hold a job, but it was reinforced a million different ways. And so I began to have a critique of my own people. Why? Because I'm going to work working hard, and I go to work and they're sitting out on the corners, come back and they're sitting on the corners, and now they want to increase my taxes. It's forced, not having an analysis, not understanding the whys, not knowing any of that portion. I would repeat things about the Black on Black crime that I despise now. I would repeat and talk about, well, if they shouldn't have done the crime, an old Beretta phrase, if they you don't do the crime if you can't do it. It made sense to me, and I would live into that, not recognizing that I was a pawn, right? I was the one that the white institutions love to hold up as, if you just be good as this individual, all would be well. Ignorant and always not having a clue. But God had me go through that process, I think, for the journey that I'm in now. So fast forward, and I know I need to end the time of this, when I got to a place of being introduced to the work that I'm doing now, mind blown. My first realization that I had not a full analysis, I had no analysis, was when I ended up in a national space, Edwin, and they were doing one of them was the pyramid exercises, but there was something else that I was definitely trying to grasp hold to. What in the world is this social justice stuff all about? Now, I did go back to school eventually in my career, but I did not have the teaching and understanding the way that I should have about Black history, right? And I graduated in 78, so the schools weren't teaching it properly. So being in that space in national, I remember an exchange where there were those that were talking about meeting with the law enforcement, and they were angry for what was being offered. And I'm trying to listen with my corporate mind, fresh coming in, trying to understand social justice, figuring, well, what is wrong with this exchange? And everything was agitated, and they were angry and going back and forth. and the police was making different, they were recounting the story, and I just couldn't track why they were still so angry. It's like, man, they're going to meet with you. They're going to be there and you'll have the exchange. What's the problem? And they were offering to meet at Starbucks, and I'm like, and they didn't like that either. And they was upset about it. And I'm like, what in the world? These people, okay, maybe this is too much. They just angry about everything. I don't get it, right? And then finally, one sister in the crowd said, and I was like, I don't, what's the problem? She says, because we don't go to no effing Starbucks. And I was like, you see something as simple as that. It was like, in a million years, because I was drinking Starbucks every morning, right? Based on the privilege that was afforded me, would never have been able to understand that analysis. That's a small thing, but it was a crack in that armor, in that wall that had been built up, that made me think I need to listen more and hear about others' experience, right? But by the same token, I also felt like, God, you blessed me to be there, not to weaponize it against my people, but now I know some things about how white structures and systems work. And so now I'm able to spot so now when people want to say, oh, you know what, Pastor Trina, and but I really appreciate you. You're different. It's like, no, I'm not different at all. I come a dime a dozen. Black people are amazing for what they. Let me talk to you about what's amazing, and it's certainly not me, right? There are rock stars that do what I do, and so anyway, I just felt it important. I wanted to share that because this anti-Blackness is something that is not that white people, that other cultures have. We have it, and it's been so expertly woven into everything. I love these spaces, and I love the education and the exposure that we're having now, because it checks me, and I'm hopeful that it's checking others at every point that says, wait a minute, that's not just now a lie, it's always been a lie. And now I need to begin to undo some of that. And it's like having to surgically remove it. Some of the knowledge learned was good, but you got to be very careful that you're cutting away all of that rotten, all of the bad parts, all of the untruths, so that you're not destroying the whole, but you're getting rid of all of it, right? And it all can't be done at the same time, because you would be stuck, unable to move, lose all confidence in everything. It has to be done in layers. And it's like, that's good. Now come back, because there's more that I need to cut away. And I'm just here for the cutting away. I'm here to share my journey, to talk about what I've learned and discovered. I want to hold on to some of what I've learned, to be able to expose some of the truths and the truths about who people are in the corporate world. Take the good and then leave all of those lies, to be able to truly stand in the power of who we are.
And this is good. I mean, like, really, for real. I feel like I'm sitting at the feet of so much, and I'm trying to like take it in, and I'm writing down all of these different notes and nuggets for me. And this is healing also for me as well. And I'm saying for me because I am very, very aware that I have found myself at, I almost want to say a fork in the road. I believe very strongly, and I'm saying this, I'm going to frame it this way intentionally. It took a very, very strict and it took a strict practice of faith in order for me to break free from unhealthy cyclical behavior in my life. And it took that, it took a strong covering of people and a strong structure of people around me in order to help me to grow and become the woman that I am today. I needed those examples and all of the different things. So there is nothing in my life, in my faith journey, in my relationship between me and God, there is nothing in that process in my life, in my experience within the church that has gone wasted, that was for naught. Everything was for a reason. And I came to a place intentionally that I initially thought was to derail me from faith. I came to a place where I experienced, and I still am close to that place. However, God is like so in it that it's amazing. where I experienced what I call a crisis in faith. I watched a sitcom, and there was a scene in this movie where they were baptizing the slaves. Then the white pastor came to the plantation because there had been runaway slaves, and so they all came together, and the black pastor, preached the sermon and the message, of submission, and use scripture, for the slaves, and then they baptized the slaves into, and forgiveness of their sins, what have you. And it was something in that just broke something in me. Something woke up in me, and I was afraid to explore it. I was afraid to explore it because I was afraid that it was going to cause me to lose everything that I had believed in, crisis in faith. And so there are a lot of individuals that have left the church, walked completely away because they associate racism, white supremacy, hatred, all of that with God. And so in this, and this is like, it's kind of this, it's a heavy duty question. I guess one is, we have to then start helping people understand what is even the role of the church, and how is anti-Blackness present? Is anti-Blackness one of the reasons why people are leaving the church? Is it something that even needs to be addressed, by the church? How do we even begin to have this dialogue with individuals that are hitting this fork in the road and having this crisis in faith and afraid that they're not going to make it through? So they either go into heavy assimilation, and I just am going to live my life in denial and not even explore whether or not God is bigger than what it is that I'm experiencing, or to trust that God is bigger and explore it anyway and go through that crisis in faith. So I threw that out there. And Pastor Kevin, Pastor Curtis, I know it's a loaded thing, but yeah, I had to throw it out there.
Yeah, let me say this. It is a loaded question. I'm not going to call myself an expert at all. Let me just throw that out on the Black church, but these are conversations I have like on a weekly basis. And Bryson said something, Pastor Trina said some things, and I just want to go back. I want to be like the needle that kind of threads through their conversation and tie it together. But Bryson talked about that picture he had of this Eurocentric Jesus, and for 50, some odd years, for me, I've struggled with that picture in the sense of, when you come into the knowledge that that's really not based upon scripture, based upon geographical information, that's not how Jesus looked. So just let me say that first. But the struggle is, and I kind of relate it to how I've often been sarcastic relative to statements about our ancestors when they were enslaved for years, finally got free, but did not know they were free. And I kind of liken those two together because we sat in church for so long, looked at these pictures of this white Jesus. White Jesus was, hanging in a lot of our homes. And then we find out again that that's not a proper, picture of him. I know for myself, not that I don't believe it, but I still struggle with it based upon how, these things were indoctrinated and ingrained in me. And it's kind of like Now, you have people that color wrap cars, and you can buy a black car, go get it color wrapped, and it's bright pink. You can drive around that car for 3 years and forget that your car really is black. And, so I kind of struggle with that dynamic. I sit back and I look at how many, you talked about how many people have walked away from the church, and let's just say the Black church. But then I look at how many of us have walked away from the Black church. And there's no, but I'm putting it in context, there's no Black church, white church. But how many of us, grew up like Florida and James in the Black church, but then we finally get a piece of the pie, and now we're rocking like George and Wheezy, and we go,
You're killing me.
And I'm being real, because where I grew up in Riverside, I went to predominantly white elementary school, predominantly white junior high, high school, California Baptist College before it transitioned to California Baptist University. When I was there, there's probably 800 students, 20 of us were Black. So it's this dynamic that I've lived for most of my life. But again, it's still that struggle where you sit back and you're like, is we really free? And so I can't make light of that anymore because it's in me. When I hear people in conversations like this talk about, Jesus is a Black man, that hits me kind of like where I gotta, it's this conflict because these pictures we've seen. So again, I don't, I'm not the expert in this. I was senior pastor 17 years, been in ministry for 33. So I've been in ministry longer than I've not been, based upon, me being 54. But again, it's these constant conflicts of construct that I deal with on a daily, and truth be told, I think a lot of us do.
Pastor Curtis?
Yeah, that's
because I'm feeling your heart over here. So I'm like, I was trying to discern, who am I feeling? That's you.
Yeah, when you just thinking about the question there, and I asked you there while you're giving the question, I'm getting text messages here on Facebook talking about how many people don't want to have anything to do with Christianity. And so, and it comes from there because I know you had mentioned about, specifically like the Black church, but this is causing, I should say, the lack of what the Black church may be not doing is maybe one of the reasons, like I said, and like Kelvin, I'm an expert just in conversations that I've had. I haven't done extensive study, in this, but I liken and I look at some of the statements being made at some of the young people that I'm talking to, and also my own personal experiences of where I was in that time, in that place when I wanted to leave. What was it that was compelling me to want to leave? And it was mostly when I got involved in this work. That was the defining factor of, okay, what's going on? Because I had taken the pill, basically about the anti-Blackness, about being the better, get the education, have 2.5 kids, a white picket face, you're gonna have the American dream. I had taken the pill, but there's so many different situations that getting in this work that hindsight 2020 that I started to play out my life again through the new lens and started to be able to identify those areas of where that anti-Blackness played out in me and how much, I had ingested, as Bryson was saying, and then how much I ingested it when it came to my faith walk and the church that I had, because I was bent on, well, my church was going to be multicultural. I'm not going to have, this and everything. And it was based all upon, my experiences and what I had seen. And I thought I experienced the most division in the church when we were set tripping over Church of God in Christ, and we were set tripping over, Baptists, and we were, or that's it. When I was told by a pastor, when I was a youth leader and I was trying to organize a youth conference, we don't associate. with the Church of God in Christ. No, we don't do this. So when I saw that playing out, it took me living in places like Oakland for 10 years. I had to dismantle some of the things I learned in Stockton about how we viewed each other. And then in order to come to a space where, like, I remember the first time I was in Oakland, I was sitting in I attended a Baptist, I call Baptist church. And we went to a Church of God in Christ, you know how churches would visit each other, you know, have that, you know, tradition. And so we're sitting in there the first time and I'm with my boys and I am spooked, right? They're looking at me and they're like, dude, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? I was like, do we do this? I mean, it had been so ingrained. I was like, is this okay? Do we do this because of what I have been taught? And I should say, and I'm using that instance of the different ways that we're talking about, you know, coming together, unity, unification, loving one another. But how many people, you know, don't see that played out, you know, with us, you know, with the concepts of Christianity, when we're talking about, you know, the statements of evangelicals, you know, and that statement, you know, too. But there's a deep, I'm gonna want to just pivot into a deep pocket for me and make this a little personal, is that when I started looking back, I should say, when I had the hindsight experience and started going back in history and started reading more and started, you know, basically educating myself more about who I was, you know, my history, where my people came from, is that the comparisons I began to make between the paternalism of the plantation and that same spirit that was being played out in the church is where I started to have my real struggle, and that I'm seeing that, you know, kind of play out when I'm talking to people, you know, even now when they're talking about controlling the Black bodies and their expressions of Christianity. You know, when they talk, you know, basically that at one point, right, I showed you guys I was in the music industry, so there's one point there was white people taking Black songs, Black artist songs, and making them popular, you know, so it's stealing us stuff, right? You know, stealing our culture, stealing our style, you know, and all that other stuff. And now there's been a shift, and some people are saying, okay, so now why are we going to the white is right and now taking what we call the evangelical way and placing it into our context, because now that is the right way we do church. When we're taking out the biggest piece of us, which with the white church didn't have, and that was lament. You know, that was the lamentations. That was to be able to express in yourself through the pain, you know, acknowledging that there was pain, acknowledging that there was this lament that you had to have of being able to heal. You know, also I should say a turn off for a lot of people is this whole, I should say, this whole fascination from the church with reconciliation. We got to reconcile. We have to reconcile. And so the young people are just like, what can you reconcile? Reconciliation means that there was a good relationship to begin with. And so now that they're becoming more educated and that there's more resources available to really go to the history and find out how complicit the church was, they're looking at us saying like, and how could you agree, you know, with this, you know, when they were the cause for this, when their Bible, when they had the slave Bible, when they did this to our people, when they played this out, when people like Billy Graham and Jerry Falwell lined themselves up with people saying God has moved through the presidency or whoever that created policies that basically were detrimental to our people, is like there's no separation of church and state. It's actually a cause of church. Where were you? In church, where are you now? I think that's one of the biggest spaces of where I'm hearing right now, as far as where people are and why they're walking away, because even the narrative that the church was there for Dr. King, which is not true, you know, right? He also addressed, you know, those Christian moderates, you know, of that time. So it was not true. He was not so popular amongst the churches, you know, and things like that as we were led to believe. But in the narrative that many of the young people have today, they saw the church as being the leader because they saw Dr. King as being the leader from the church. And so in looking in the context of now, young people out here on the streets are wondering, where are you? That's why they're hungry when we get out there and they want to pray. They want us to pray over them. They want us to be there. They want it to be presence of God and faith in there. They're just not liking the way it's playing out.
Yeah. Can I pick up on something that Pastor Curtis said?
Mm-hmm.
You lifted up this notion of like the sort of reversal of kind of stealing culture, and we're now Black, you know, there's a lot of, and from your estimation, there's many Black congregations that are sort of bringing in evangelical songs, you know what I mean, evangelical structures, et cetera. And one of the things that sort of is disheartening about some of our Black congregational spaces is when you talk to a lot of Black clergy persons or folks in the congregation, sort of like who they're reading, like the type of theologians that they're reading, you know, they don't even know the beautiful tradition of Black and womanist theologies that so many of us, so many folks who come out of the Black church and, you know, we're able to go and do deeper level of study, who are called out of the Black church to speak back to the Black church. You know, a lot of our pastors are reading John MacArthur, right? They can quote John MacArthur. They go to these conferences with MacArthur. They're reading his books. You know, they, you know, are in the sort of mold and spirit of Billy Graham, right? You know what I mean? And,
Oh,
the TBN guys, you know, John Hagee, right? You know what I mean?
Max Lucado.
Max Lucado, you know what I mean? You can just kind of go down the list, and they know all of these white folks, you know what I mean? And they don't know any of our Black thinkers. And that's just really disappointing. Now, I don't want to put all of that on the Black congregation, because sometimes that's Black academics who have become separated from our congregational spaces also. But it's also has been sort of a rejection of Black liberation theology, womanist theologies, in many of our congregations. And so, you know, if we're going to, you know, really challenge our folks to form or to deepen, their Black faith that's rooted in Blackness, they got to read Black folk. You know what I mean? A lot of our folks, not only are they not reading them, they don't even know that they exist.
Yeah, I would go even further, Bryson, and say it's not a rejection, it's an oppression of Black voices. Like, check it. The reality is, like, the Black theologians and things of that nature, I didn't read them not because I didn't read them because I didn't know they existed, right? Like, as I was coming up through the church, right? And it wasn't because they weren't there. It wasn't because they didn't exist. That no one told me. Because the reality is, religion in America, Christianity in America, let me get very particular, Christianity in America, right? Because that's what we're talking about here, is not Black Christianity. It's just not. It's not. It is a white supremacist religion, period. And Black people have been put into it, and we have literally become the salt and light inside of a dark world called white Christianity. Black people, I think Black people who are my age, 37 and younger, so I'm like an elder millennial, and then, you know, there's a whole generation coming behind us, right? So these are 20 and 21s and 18s, they are not millennials, right? Whole nother wonderful generation. But I think our generation, we ended up leaving the Black church, not because we hated God, but because what was happening is we were trying, our parents and our forefathers and everybody were trying to give us a religion that was not ours. And we were just calling bullshit. And so in the middle of it, we're like, no, wait a minute, that I hear your lesson, but what you're telling me doesn't make sense with my real life. I went to school. That's not what's happening out here. And so all of a sudden what we do, well, if I'm going to keep the church, well, I'm going to go over here with these white folk, because at least as they are working out the religion that they created for themselves, it is bearing good results. And those things make sense. In other words, in the Black church, as they are working out this theology that was given to us, it is not bearing the results that you all are talking about. It is not bearing joy, it is not bearing love or peace. But when I go to the white churches, it seems to be working out that way. Well, it's because it's their religion. It wasn't ours. And ours has been literally subsumed. So I would say, to your point, even about anti-Blackness, to stay in the church, stay connected to the church as a Black man, I had to do what Jesus said. I had to lose my faith to get it back. I had to literally give up. I had to give up some of the lessons, some of the words that my mother gave me, who was my pastor, and keep the lessons. And that was hard. I had to give up words and systems and be able to keep lessons. And that is difficult. It is difficult. And I decided I'm not abdicating the space in the Black church. I am a son of it. I was born in it. And you are going to take me just like I am, cussing, drinking, whatever. You're going to take me like I am because I am your son. You will not push me out.
Woo! You are my son, Edwin. I love that. I love it. Yes. This is really, really good and needed and necessary. I wanted to answer the question a little bit down a different path, not against anything that was said, but down a different path. I'm seeing when you ask the question, is anti-Blackness in the church driving people away from the church, young people, old people, period. And putting a period on what everyone else has said. I wanted to also say that I'm wondering if we are also short-sighted in our analysis, certainly not on this call. You all have a lot of thought that's put into it, but I mean, generally speaking, the church is a microcosm of what's going on in society. And the people that attend churches are part of society. They share the same path, etc. So I think in many cases, the church is an easy on top of the things. Now, let me say this. I never grew up in the church with a white Jesus on the wall. And so when people always talk, sometimes people that have never been in a church, they assume that all churches did that because a lot of churches did, right? And I never remember my church specifically saying Jesus is white or is Black or is anything. We just didn't do the whole pictorial worship thing of a picture, one way or the other. And I hear things like that frequently, broadly stated across the Black church as of things that this is what Black churches do. Number one, all Black churches didn't teach and do all of the same things, but sometimes it feels like when younger people come up that may not have even come from that area, they repeat what they've heard and they've some kind of way solidified it as this was the bad Black church. Let's get rid of it because they were wrong with white Jesuses and all of that. Now, having said that, there is a lot of issue with the way we interpreted scripture or the way that we taught and repeated without doing the study. And for sure, we did not know all of the voices that we should be looking at. And we mirrored behind a lot of things that may have worked for white folk that was not beneficial for Black people. But I'm stuck on this notion that as we are learning more and as we're working the anti-Blackness out of us and out of society, that we are also have the tolerance and capacity to lead people in that moment within the churches to make shifts. I have the same kind of frame when people speak a lot about hurt church hurt, right? For me, it's the same thing because we don't walk away outside of Edwin. We don't walk away from our jobs when we're hurt. Many of us stay right there and keep getting checks, right? Or
I didn't walk away. Let's be clear. I was trying to stay. No, don't put it nicely. Say it like it was. I tried to stay every time. They kicked my ass out.
Yes, they did. But most of the times we don't lean in until we're pushed out or fired. We normally hang in those spaces, regardless of what it is. And now it seems like a safe, easy landing place for some of it is to be able to have critique with that. It funnels all into the church as a safe place to critique. And I'm saying that, not saying don't critique it. There are things that should be explored and challenged and changed. But I'm saying that it can't be the catch-all, end-all, the way that it is spoken of in a lot of our spaces. It's like anti-Blackness and yep, that's why we're leaving. It's like, no, there's a whole lot of issues with the church, particularly when you start looking at individual spaces. And what I also want to make sure that we're not saying in this space is that though it is a cause, it is not the cause. There are a lot of things that's going on. And we'd have to look, at the individual cases, and we have to look at the broad history of what has occurred. And because I still have and what I've heard on this call, we haven't fallen out of love with God, but
No.
we definitely are bringing critique against the way he has been presented. And in bringing that presentation, I want to make sure that we are also having the capacity to introduce some of those theologians that we have not been exposed to. It's me and the Starbucks story again. Don't leave me hanging out there turning your back because I don't get it right now. I'm looking for those that will be able to say, about that thing you just preached on, Pastor Trina. Here's another way that could be thought about. And because you've gone off and have all of the experience learning, maybe you have parents. One of my dear friends have parents that were Panthers that was real clear on the real intent and frame that was very much different than what I was taught. So don't walk away from me, leaving me in ignorance. How about in love and the love and kindness have I drawn? To be able to determine that I truly don't want what you're offering before you walk away from it. And I think from there's so many institutions that can be helped because the expectation is that you just should know. But for me, I'll be 60 in a few months. But up until about 5 years ago, it truly was not a choice to not know. It was not, I didn't know, right? And so I just want to come from that frame that says that a lot of what we're saying is not confrontational or I'm against it. I want to make sure that we are also stating that someone has to lean in. I think it's part of the journey that God had me around all the white folk that he did for a while to learn, et cetera, and be able to speak the language, but then be able to bring in and make a journey from where people are to where they should be without just walking away and turning backs on things. So that's all. Yeah, anti-blackness, a piece of it. And we need to also make sure that we are leading people out of where they are in love.
I did want to say, and I want to say this, especially that, and I hope that you all also are paying attention to the chat from the live. If you're not, you want to be. Yes.
What the people saying?
Father God, this is okay. So let's do that. Let's do that. I don't typically even do that, but in this case. And I want to thank you, Reverend Ben McBride, Pastor Jackie Hilliard, and some others that just soldiers in the fight that are in this chat that are engaging in this dialogue. I'm asking you all to lean into the chat because this is a discussion that nobody has wanted to talk about. Nobody wants to have this difficult conversation. Individuals in the chat, a couple were saying, oh, I'm feeling anxiety. We're feeling anxiety because sometimes when you go in for an examination in the doctor's room and you lay yourself on the table and they begin to press down in those areas, they're looking for the place where there's pain. And they have to determine where the pain is in order to be able to identify where they need to actually pay attention to. But the other thing is, if someone is diagnosed with cancer, it doesn't, you can have cancer that is spread to your stomach, but started off as breast cancer. They don't call it stomach cancer because it spread to the stomach or the other areas. It's still breast cancer. And so I'm saying that because we still need to deal with the thing, the elephant in the room, the huge thing. What I want to make sure at the end of this dialogue is that even in the midst of the fork in the road, Edwin, I love what you said in regard to you have to give up your faith in order to find your faith. Unless the grain of wheat fall to the ground and die. There are things that I've gone through in my journey and my relationship and my learning of who God is for me and what he means to me. I have come to many forks in the road, and this was one of them, to where once again, I have to remember God is bigger than a fork in the road. God is so much greater than the questions that I have, and God is not intimidated by my questions. He is not intimidated. My questions don't scare him. He doesn't have to defend himself. He's God. He doesn't have to defend his love. He just shows it. And so I just wanted to make sure that in that, when we get to places where we start questioning, you know, oh my gosh, what is going on? What has happened? I see a timeline, you all, from the civil rights movement to where we are now. I see a timeline. I was born in 1969. My parents did not talk to me about Martin Luther King Jr. and Angela Davis and all of that. They didn't talk to me about any of that. Why? Because by the time I got 10 years old and we were having conversations in the house, we were dealing with drug addiction and from you know, parents that were inundated with drugs in the community and stuff. My knowing of the church, I didn't have any knowing of the church other than my grandma and going with her. But once my grandparents died, I didn't have anyone that was taking me into the church and teaching me about religion or what have you. I was able to find a way back because of what intuitively my grandmother and grandfather sowed into my life. But I went through hell from 10 all the way through, you know, like 20. When it came to crack cocaine, when it came to gang violence and drugs and different things like that. And so the prison industrial complex, all of this stuff that took place in between the civil rights movement and where we are today. And so when you look at that, if you look at the book of Judges and how they would get, you know, they would come back, you know, into a place of knowing and then go through generations and then have to come back. I see the same cyclical patterns, you know, that take place. So it's not, to me, confusing that people are in a place like, where's the church? What's the role of the church? Who is the church? Am I the church? Does the church care about me? Why aren't they present? What happened? So you guys have answered a lot of those questions, especially with the Bryson, the literature that's being read and the different themes that have done that. When you said that, I drew parallels to what Pastor Trina was saying in regard to coming up and working in corporate America, and then coming into the church and dealing with people of color from a corporate America mindset, and how white supremacy then in our subconscious and in our way of thinking has infiltrated into roles to where, so it's not surprising to me that I see these gulfs of divide. Now, all that being said, what do we do about it now? Where are we now? How do we help individuals know that that there is a place for them to belong? Is that place the church? Where is the church today? What role does the church play for 2020 in the community today?
Yeah, if I want to just jump in and say really quickly, one, I think that you're absolutely right. You know, Elder Tony, I call you Dr. Tony. I don't know, I've always been calling you that, so I'm trying to get your title right, Elder Tony. But I think the truth is that I'm going to talk about Black people because I'm Black. I think the Black church, I see the Black church metaphorically as the children of Israel in Babylon. They came and took all the intelligent, the smart, the creative, all of us, and they brought us into this foreign land, and they said, you will work for us and build our cities and build our kingdom. What happened is we got very, very comfortable, some of us, a lot of us, most of us, in this land called Babylon, and we found ourselves going to whoring after other gods. And the reality is now, in my opinion, I think that the Black church in particular needs to come back to our God. I am not saying that when I believe that our people in my generation and the generation after me are rejecting the church, I think they're not rejecting the church. They're rejecting American Christianity, which serves a God that is not ours. That is not our God. And that's what they're rejecting. And we then, us, who are structuring and pastoring and creating these churches, need to wake up. And we need to stop creating and structuring and crafting our churches after this idolatrous white supremacist God, and stop going a whoring after, and come back to our God that is not Jesus. Jesus is not our God. That is not to say that Jesus is not important. That is not to say that Jesus is not the Son of God, but it is to say that Jesus worship is not God worship. They are not the same thing. And that Jesus worship that we've been given by Billy Graham and all these other evangelicals is idolatry. We need to get back to God. And we can have Jesus too, because I love him. And you ain't going to take him from me either.
Pass the mic, Pastor Curtis. Right?
Edwin might have been stepping on folks in the comments talking about Jesus is idolatry.
All right. Hey, I'm telling you, but I tell you, I'm learning some stuff. I've been learning some stuff lately.
I feel when he mentions like Graham and these other folks and the rejection, the need to reject America's God. I mean, I'm in full agreement with him on that. And I think a part of what we need to reject, Pastor Curtis alluded to this earlier, is we need to reject the concept of racial reconciliation, which is really kind of, pervasive in many of our congregations. And I mean, this comes from someone who used to be a practitioner around racial reconciliation in my undergrad days, where I thought that was really a sign of the gospel. And one of the reasons why I think that, right, it needs to be, there's nothing to be reconciled to, but, more importantly than that, I think that Black folks, we have to reconcile to ourselves, right? You know what I mean? And our own schisms within our congregational life and our community life, with the rampant homophobia, right? The rampant patriarchy, and in our communities, there's friction and there's fracture and it's fractured in many ways. And so instead of thinking about reconciling with folks who frame reconciliation as a process of discipleship into whiteness, we need to reject that. And we need to think about what it looks like to reconcile with our own selves. You know what I mean? I think, and a part of that, I think, is essential to that, I think is what Edwin is getting at, is the rejection of this white God, and embracing both within our own congregations, a Black God, a Black Jesus, right? You know what I mean? And I think a part of that conversation is, when folks who are walking away from the church and have found peace and other religious traditions and African spiritual traditions, et cetera, that we're not trying to unsettle their faith journey to bring them back into the fold of Christianity, even a Black version of Christianity. I don't have any particular investment in that and bringing folks who found peace in other religious traditions back into this tradition. Like, you're still Black, you know what I'm saying? And we can still, and we can build with one another, you know what I mean? So I also don't want to reduce sort of like a wholeness in our community down to one's participation in the Black church, you know what I mean? Because I think that kind of reinstantiates some of the problems that we need to unsettle. So
yeah, I think the challenge for me gets to be for those that have found peace in whichever expression of faith that they have. We live in a society that has so many options of choice. I think that is one of the things I'm loving about the organization that I'm in, being multi-faith. I think we have grace for people to be a lot of different things. I think the critique specifically for those that have not made a journey of the Black church is where it is a challenge for me. In that, I do see in a lot of the spaces that I'm in, young people are desirous of the church showing up. And one of the critiques I guess I would have is that if you're wanting the church to show up, do you want to proselytize the church to be what you want it to be before it shows up? Or do you want the church you're calling for the church, but for me as a pastor, I feel you don't get to tell me how to be the church to show up to help you with what you need me to show up for. I'm supportive of that. In spaces like that, I'm not trying to proselytize people to be who I am, but I also don't want to be proselytized for you to make me be who you are, but you're calling for me. So where's the church? Church, come. Oh wait, church, don't come. I don't want you to come and be that. But where's the church? Church, come. Nope, don't want you to be that. Don't come. And it gets to be a very confusing space. It's like I can come and stand and be all of who I am, but don't ask me to come and be who you are. unless through my searching, through our discussions, I transition to be something different, that's great, but that's a different conversation usually. I'm talking now about showing up out in the public space and the public spheres and what have you. And so I think that our conversations in some of the community spaces get a little convoluted. It's like, are we having now a doctrinal conversation, or are we having a conversation about showing up for policy change, or are we trying to show up and to stand against behaviors? Because I do want to explore behaviors of white supremacy, whether it's showing up in me or wherever it is, and make those adjustments. But when we, so for me, it gets all kind of blended in. And I don't know that we stay in this space long enough to kind of clearly articulate, what is it that we want? How do we want us to show up? To be Black in this moment, do we all have to show up and be the same? No, because we're not saying that any other place and any other. What we do want to do is to show up, period. And while we're there, if your actions are still causing me suppression or causing me issues, let's explore and have conversation about the outcome that is being generated by my actions or yours. But I feel like we lose each other and we start to splinter off into separate camps when we're not clear. Let's create some ground rules of how do we show up for liberation for each other without now also having to have all assimilate.
Pastor Trina, before we move from what you were saying, you show up a lot. Bishop Turner shows up a lot. Members of Victory and Praise show up a lot. So as you were saying this and you were making as you were raising that question, what you're not doing in raising the question, you're not saying how you show up. So because you show up, and when you show up, you are received. When Bishop shows up, he is received when others show up. So I guess what I want to ask is, how are you showing up?
I show up in love. I show up to be able to respond to a call in places that I'm invited in. For me, I'm able to separate. I've shown up in spaces for things that I did not necessarily support or believe in, but I do believe in people. I do believe in the importance of liberation for Black people. So I've shown up in spaces where people were actually, sprinkling turkey juice and saying, literally, "Tail," you were there. And that was I don't get it. I didn't get it. It wasn't a practice of mine and the chants and the gods and what have you, but fully leaned in, knowing internally who I believe, what I stand on. But it was important for them to have me in the space without judgment, to just lean in and love, to hear the stories, to hear the history. That's what I was called for. And then my prayer always is, God, whatever else you have for me to do in this moment, be it in a one-on-one conversation or not, you'll make that clear for me, and I'm willing to step into that place. But in the meantime, if it's that you need me to not separate myself from you, not pretend like you're beneath me or above me, I show up for the people in love, and I'm there, and I'm trying to always ask and discern, God, how do I serve in this moment? How can I be beneficial in this moment? And even if my belief in who you are is not the same as someone else, are we here to have that discussion right now, or are we here to show up in solidarity for someone? And so me responding, it's not a difficult place for me to show up, and I'm fully there, and I'm not showing up because I don't want to be, because I certainly have choices. And so that for me, the answer is to show up in love, to be there. And if I can help someone not be oppressed, if I can help someone in their liberation, I'm willing to do that. And I only draw a line is when now you want to be free in all that you want, but now you want me not to be free in what I want. Then that gets to be the conflict.
Can I tap in real quick? Because, Pastor Trina, one thing I appreciate, so much about Pastor Trina is, when she always shares her story and her journey of, how previously, it was, I show up, in the form of mercy. How many of us have learned to do in the spaces of churches that we've learned to give the clothing, we learned to supply the food and things like that, and that it was a journey. And so I try to live in this culture, basically that I, even as I watch their journey and many others, of culture of honor, where I appreciate you for who you are, and I don't punish you for who you're not. And I realize that people have different spaces or times that they basically come into their own awakening, revelation, or where that is, knowledge of where God is up, whatever that veil is, in order to allow them to come through. So I know that that space there is that, like I said, with King's statements, there cannot be no deep frustration where there is not deep love. Is that a lot of times in this work, when you come into this, then the frustration begins to actually dwell in many organizers against the church itself, because either their lack of participation, lack of voice, lack of activity, lack of, as we're saying, showing up. And what does that look like? But what I learned in the process of that, I thank God, that He allowed me to be coming to a season of maturity in thinking of knowing, okay, where's someone in this journey? I wasn't always here. I wasn't there. And it was a lot of anti-Blackness that played into it that I didn't even know what that was until it's almost like salvation. I didn't know I needed to be saved until I got saved. I didn't know I needed it, And so, even in the same with this, I know people that, I was frustrated with that weren't, involved in the work, that are now leading masses movements, now, and everything. And so in that sense is that, having that sensitivity, even that pastor that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about one who said, we don't do this and we don't do that. It wasn't until his, actual homegoing services that I listened to stories, that I listened to some of the things that people were saying about him. I listened to this great man of faith that was told by the city, you will not have this building. And he believed God for it and got the building that they said he would never have. And so I began to understand, some of the things that he was doing to me was what he was taught. It was what he was taught of how to do what he was doing. And he was doing it in all love and earnestness. When he told me to do what he was telling me to do, it wasn't out of any malice at all. He thought he was doing the best thing for me as a pastor and as me as one of his sheep. And so I've come to, really understand and look at, how do I help someone else, knowing where I was in the journey, as Pastor Trina said, give them, the resources, give them some of the things that I've read, give them some of the things, share each other's the stories. A lot of times we don't have enough time, like in this space, to do that. But, usually when we can find someone that is basically where they are in that journey, who's willing to walk, and come along with you. Now, let me just put a pause there and a little, I should say a little comma there. And it depends on who you are in this moment right now. I don't have time to do that a lot with I just put out there with the white people and walk you on this journey. I will give you the resource list and I will give you, the way to go. But my people right now, if you're willing to walk, and if you want to know, I definitely want to teach, and I definitely want to share my experiences or connect you with people that I was connected to understand where are we. And I'm definitely, with everything within me, believe in the faith of God, that He knows where we should be and what we should be doing. And my basic statement to many people is, what did He call you to do?
Mm.
What did He call you to do? If we don't just get on the bus and sit down, but get in the bus and sit in the seat that He tells us to sit in, then we can move, this thing, together. So I've come to look at it, okay, maybe they're not there in that journey. Maybe they're not doing that over there, or maybe that's not their thing over there. But, I pray they're doing what God told them to do, because there's a place, and in all His sovereignness, He knows what we need to do and where we need to be. We just need to know we're in that lane, right? That's
Well,
why I just say.
let me just add this one little thing, because it makes a difference. If you show up, I already know who I am, but showing up in spaces, you also learn more. I've learned so much in being in the space. You won't know to interrogate, question things by just staying in your own camp, right? And there's many things that I've showed up in space and I've walked away and I said, nope, God, I still believe this way. However, there are some things that I've learned. I remember sitting, Ben, I don't know if he's still on or not, one of the earlier boot camps, a Live Free, I don't even think it was a boot camp, it was a Live Free gathering out in San Francisco, and Kat Brooks was there, and she was talking about abolishing the police. It was the first time I heard it, right? And when I did, I'm thinking, oh man, where in the world? It was still early on. And I'm thinking, these people have lost their minds. I am not for that, abolishing the police. Oh man, so I sat there, but guess what my posture was? Mhm. Leaned in, smiled, like, okay. My mind is like screaming, what in the world? There is no way. They have gone too far, right? But I heard it and I was listening. I listened to everything she said. I listened to the other panelist speakers that were there. It was the first time, and I walked away still thinking, yeah, I don't know about that one. We'll see how far. I didn't need to get the mic and get up and say, you're crazy, you're wrong, this is too far, this is going to be anarchy. It's not going to, it's almost like a scripture that talked about things that then you pondered in your heart, right? So walked away. Now, after hearing it over and over, doing some study on it, knowing that there is a different society that can be created, understanding the history of why policing was there, still learning from Marcel and Bryson and, still learning. Now it's an easy thing to say. Absolutely, it's where I want to go, right? Strategy for me, teaching through the corporation, everybody can't hear that right now, because for me, if I wasn't who I was, I'd just got up then, got my bishop would say, got my grip and got up and left, right? I just would have left right then. Strategy for me is everybody can't hear everything. They can't know all of where you're going right away. But I am fully convinced that that is a process, not afraid to say it on a Facebook Live, right? But it would never have gotten there by not showing up to begin with, or not being uncomfortable in the moment. And I am trying to live in a space where I'm having grace for a lot of voices, and then still trusting God on how far to go. How far can I go and still be who he's calling me to be, and where can I serve in the process with others? So that's just one example that by being in those places, people will get there. But we also, I'm hopeful that we're not cutting people off. That's not what we're saying, but I want to just say on Facebook Live, we also can't discount and cut people off too quick. Let them keep hearing it a few times, and because they won't get with it the first time, it's okay. If it's for them, eventually it'll be like, I'm hearing it now, and I see the role that I can play in bringing that to fruition.
I mean, since there's a small break, I just want to jump in and say, I'm reading some of the comments in the chat, and one of the things that I think I may want to respond to is just this idea that, yes, anti-Blackness is still very alive in the church, because the church is a creation of human beings. It is not some divine thing that floated out of the ether and landed in our lap. We created it. We came up with it because we're creative, because we are the imago Dei. We are the image of God. We are creators. So we created a thing called the church. And as long as we are in it and anti-Blackness is in us, anti-Blackness will be in the church. And so there's this, so this is not about, and that's why I'm very strong about not abdicating space, because the truth is the Black church in America is my birthright. My ancestors, just like HBCUs, are my birthright in this country. Just like the Black media is my birthright in this country. Just like Black financial institutions are my birthright in this country. And so I am not going to give up this space just because I don't like the way it's rocking right now. Now, that is not me saying that it has not been detrimental and harmful to a whole lot of people, and that for their own safety and sanity, they need to take a time out, because I believe in that. But what I am saying is, for those of us who are who are able and willing, right, to stick it out and to stay here, if we really want to create a space where Black people can feel the liberation, love, joy, peace, happiness, grace, all those things that come from being a Christ follower, that come from being a Christian, then we are going to have to exercise the space, and we are going to have to tear down, build up, do all the work to create a space where my people can feel like they can come in and bring their whole self. Because even to your point, Pastor Trina, about how we show up, like, you're right. It's hard going out there with that collar on, because it means something to people. It means hurt. It means pain. It means rejection. And so we walk in and they immediately push back, because most of the time they're out there because we put them out there. We pushed them out of our spaces. When they came in and as they were, we said, no, you gotta assimilate to be here. So it's right for them when we show up in their spaces to be like, no, I'm not gonna say no, nah, y'all, you gonna assimilate to be here now, right? And so knowing that, and then hearing what you said, Pastor Trina, then knowing that, and then how then are we able to be there? We got to show up as mercy, and we got to show up as grace, and we got to show up as love, because we know that hurt people, and the people we represent are the ones who did a lot of the hurt. And so if we're going to come in building the bridge, then we got to come in doing the healing, is the way I see it.
Yeah, I think, Edwin, too, around that collar, you said it represents something. It represents hurt and rejection for some folks in our community, particularly people who've been ousted, obviously, out of our churches for varying problematic reasons. Another thing I think that we face when we're out there as ministers organizing is some of the distrust comes from the pastor in the city, pastors functioning as gatekeepers to white supremacy, and also counter-organizing the work of activists on the ground and cutting backdoor deals with local politicians that favor them and their standing within the community and does not favor the folks in their pews, right? And then those same pastors, can be applauded by their congregations because they're seen as doing community work. But the congregation sometimes doesn't really, might not understand the backdoor dealingness and I'm not going to use the term selling out. I mean, I think that's kind of just sort of is used too easily. You know what I mean? I know that it's the case sometimes, but the way their pastor becomes they see their pastor having power because of their pastor's proximity to whiteness. And they see the pastor functioning as a powerful person in that sense. But then activists and organizers who are doing work on the ground, they're like, hey, well, wait a minute. You all are trying to pop up here and kind of get us under control, is how it's viewed, so that we can be brought into this table of white supremacy, and we're trying to flip this table over. You know what I mean? So I think that's another element of the distrust in communities that folks have. And this isn't a recent problem. I mean, you read in African American religious history, these are some issues that have been in our community dating back, you know what I mean? Distrust for pastors for differing reasons. And I think, my experience as an organizer, I'm pretty sure you all have experienced this as organizers. That happens. You know what I mean? And I think that we have to address that and honor those who have that critique of us also, even if sometimes they're maybe leveling that critique at folks who aren't functioning in that way. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's coming from the space of their experience.
I'm just letting y'all flow. If y'all was waiting for me to ask another question, I can, but I promise you, I'm just letting y'all flow.
I was gonna say one more thing that I'll be quiet since nobody was talking.
I'm letting y'all flow.
And I really appreciate folks, laying out that they are daughters and sons of the Black church and don't want to give up on it. I feel the same way. I have the same sentiments. I think a part of the grace that I have for the Black community, even as a Black church, even as I have critiques of like, well, how come congregations don't maybe show up in the way that organizers that we want them to show up and organize in the community in the way that we think, builds power, etc. Some of the grace that I have is, when people critique the Black church as not doing enough, is our community has been under onslaught for hundreds of years. You know what I'm saying? And in the US for decades, deep onslaught, and to believe that like a local church can meet all of the needs in a community that has been systematically rendered vulnerable through systematic racism, and placing people in deep poverty, I think is sort of an unfair assessment, even if that congregation may not be, or that grouping of congregations may not be doing enough. Look at how much needs to be done, right? So when you look at, more, if you, to look across town, so to speak, you know what I mean, at white congregations, and, they got coffee shops and all this kind of stuff, and people are like, man, we want that in our church. It's like they're able to do that because they're getting tithing dollars, you know what I'm saying, from a system that benefits their parishioners to build
corporate dollars
Here in the Central Valley, they're getting big time farmer dollars. You know what I mean? You look at a major church, you know, in Fresno, like someone like the Well Church, they get big farmer dollars that finance, you know what I mean, their church. You know what I mean? So, and we don't typically have those levels of resources, right? And so, a church and a community where the government is doing what they're supposed to do in the sense of servicing that community, these congregations aren't needing to meet all of the different needs of the people who are coming into that church. But in our congregations, you know, our churches are tasked to meet a multitude of needs. You know what I mean? And it's difficult to do, even for congregations that have an orientation towards social justice ministry, liberation ministry, etc. It's difficult to meet all of these needs. And so I think, for me, I extend grace to the Black church as a part of the Black church because of that. You know what I mean? That's why structural change is so important.
They don't have the same resources, the same level of tithing, the corporate giving. They are expected to cover the entire the needs of the entire community, and they then are also critiqued for not having the same caliber of programs that those white churches do have. And when we do go, we'll want to then give to the churches that we want our kids to go. And of course, we want our kids to go to nice programming, nice services, nice, you know, those kinds of things. And it's the Black church kind of gets it from all sides, right? Because now we're being compared to other organizations that have a whole different thing going on. They have the systemic support, the structural support. They have the incomes support of those that's attending, and we'll want to compare apples to apples, and then we'll turn around and go to those places to be able to support. But we do want the Black church to not take tithes, not take offerings. Yes, provide all of the services in the community, and I want your programs to be point with all of the bells and whistles.
I would also argue that I actually think it's fair for them to make the comparison. I think the comparison that people are making is a fair comparison. And the comparison is fair because that's what we're preaching and telling them that we offer. And therein lies the problem. We can't, look, McDonald's exists, Burger King exists, Wendy's exists. All these places exist and we know what they sell, we know what they do. If I pop up a burger spot that sells burgers and fries, and I'm not giving you the level of service or whatever that all these other corporations that are making millions of dollars and all, if I'm not giving you that level of service, you have a right to have a problem with me.
The difference,
I mean, I guess what I'm arguing is, to some degree, and arguing in the big sense, not arguing with us, arguing in the big sense. What I'm arguing is that, going back to my original point, that the theology that we are preaching and that we are sharing is incongruent with who we are and what people are and what the experiences that we experience every day. And so when people are coming into our churches, they are absolutely expecting what they're getting down the street because that's whose Bible study we're using. If I'm using Max Lucado's Bible study and I'm not giving you Max Lucado as an experience on Sunday morning, there's an incongruency. And that is what I'm saying, right? So people are absolutely confused because the God we're preaching is not the God that we serve, is my opinion.
So in this
I hear let me just say this part. I hear that, but also when we pop up a burger joint, we're not now critiquing that burger joint for not also having sushi and Mexican food and lobster. And the point I'm making is we're wanting it to have everything, right? So I hear you, but there's that other element as well.
Absolutely, yes, I agree, because yes, absolutely.
So what I was going to bring up, throw out there to you all, is that, so in the context of, I should say, of serving and service and what people are looking for, what we're putting out there. Because I've been, like I said, I've taken the pill myself sometimes. So I found myself when I first started taking my little siblings, who were living with me, taking them down to Modesto, to the big church, to the big one that had the big church, the big kids ministry, that had the Chuck E. Cheese looking, facility and everything like that. And, let them experience, that, because I thought that would get them interested, right, in church, right? Because that was the big thing. But I knew that we didn't have it, couldn't do it. And so in that thing, I was looking at that in the sense of this whole conversation and lens is, are we reaching for what, I should say for God in this? Are we reaching for whiteness, in the context of how we do, services and things like that? Because we want that, and everything, but we're also not competing against, as he was saying, McDonald's, and everything like that. But we are competing, as we see the church has become, I say, competitive with Chuck E. Cheese, like that. So we don't want you putting your dollars in Chuck E. Cheese when you can put them in here. And so then us as talking about the context of a Black church, not being able to have those resources, not being able to do that, but are we striving, I should say, for white being right, because the white church is the one that's able to do it?
Yo, I think look, people asked me when I got fired from Concord, they were like, "When are you gonna go start a church?" I was like, "No." They were like, "Why not?" I said, "Because y'all not coming to my church. You don't want to come to my church, because check it. Concord Church has 10,000 members. Y'all go to Concord for a particular reason, because they got a parking lot ministry, because they got ushers and greeters, they got a dope youth ministry, they got budgets, they got lights and cameras and all kinds of stuff. My church won't have none of that. Y'all are not gonna get me out here on a humbug." And that's the truth, right? You ain't gonna get me out here having you in my living room struggling, and now you mad at me because we ain't got. No, we ain't doing it, because that's not the guy. And that's what I'm saying. That's my point. To your point, Pastor Curtis, I think, and to your point, Pastor Trina, I think it's like the God that Black people serve. When I go back to even our spirituality and our traditions, that come from all over the world, actually, it is not sort of overimposed with superimposed with all these other sort of American ideas that are on top of it. Yet we Black people in America, I think we're going through a new sort of reconstruction, but also a new sort of faith, what's the word I'm looking for? Martin Luther. Somebody help me, Bryson.
A Reformation.
Reformation, thank you very much.
I'm telling your professors at Duke, man.
I've been away from the academy for a minute, I don't know. But I think we're going through a new reformation where Black people in America, I think we are really creating what Black Christianity will be. We're trying to divorce ourselves of and get and exercise this demon of white supremacist Christianity out of us, and places like the Proctor Conference and all these other places are helping us do it.
Okay. Everybody just take a deep breath. I had part 2 so many times in the chat box, I can't even look at part 2 again, I tell you. Oh my gosh, when I tell y'all, oh my goodness, it almost feels like in this that even for myself, I'm a person that likes things to I don't like to be uncomfortable. However, there is no way to disrupt and be comfortable at the same time. And we definitely are in a period of season where we have to disrupt the norm or the way that things have been presented to communities of color. As we cannot awaken as a people. We cannot awaken as people of color. We cannot expect to disrupt policy and racism and policy and racism in all of these other areas and not explore how white supremacy, racism, and anti-Blackness have infiltrated and come into the structure of our places of worship. This one is one of those discussions that gets so close to home, so close to home. So I do want to leave us for sure in a place where, one, I want to make sure that people that are watching know beyond a shadow of a doubt, God is so much bigger than our brain and our capacity and ability to understand and make sense of a thing. And he is not disqualified or discredited for being God. And then if you are at a fork in the road, if you are at when you said timeout, and I was watching different people who was like, oh yeah, I'm on timeout. Okay, yeah, no, I'm on timeout. And then some people was like, nope, we advocate. And I'm right here and I'm staying here and I'm hanging on. You need to be where it is that you need to be. But I love what you said. If you have the capacity to hang in there, change is difficult. Change is not easy. And it definitely takes some time. So I know we are over time, and what I want is to end on just like a final principle, and if you could wrap it up in like 90 seconds, a final word or principle, tool, something, and please in framing it, who is it targeting? Who are you speaking to, when you're leaving this principle, this word, for those? And yes, we will have to do a part 2. At some point we will have to come back, and go a little bit deeper, because this is a journey and we've not arrived. So Pastor Curtis, principle, a nugget.
Okay, what I would leave, and this is just, I should say in general, we're talking about the education piece, is I just encourage learning your history, learning the history of our history, learning our history and our history of the church. One of the things that I understand the terms, because when we're talking about evangelicals, when we're talking about, the Christian church, understanding your relationship, your relationship with God. It's so much in what I say, and all of you are getting understanding. If anything I can do is encourage understanding and furthering the journey of your learning. We're in a sharp divide right now between the concepts of social justice and gospel, and understanding, in my opinion, social justice is part of the gospel. And so we have so many dividing factors right now that continue to divide us. And our principle that most of us know on this call is that an organized lie will be a disorganized truth. And as a people, we definitely have to come together so that these organized lies don't continue to oppress, our people.
We have to do the work required of building a new world. We have to do the work required of building a new world. And that's both undoing the anti-Blackness in ourselves and undoing the anti-Blackness within our congregational life.
Yeah, I would say to Black preachers and pastors, and I would just offer, there's so many Black people who are longing for and wanting a place called the church, and wanting to come back, wanting to be a part. And I would just ask that, we hear it and we begin to create spaces where, we're able to tell Black people what's great about ourselves, instead of nitpicking on all the ways that we can be a little bit better. And if we can start orienting our theology that way, and I'm very particular, telling Black people what's great about ourselves, instead of nitpicking on, those things that aren't perfect. I think we can see a great influx of people into the church house, not for money or anything like that, but just because they'll feel like it's a safe place.
I would say this, that United Negro College Fund slogan was, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste." And then 3 John 2 says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health just as your soul prospers." And That word soul in the Greek is suke, your mind, your will, and your intellect. So I would just say that we need to properly and intentionally educate ourselves.
And I'd like to end by saying this is hard work. We have 400 plus years to unlearn and undo and to fix. And so my encouragement is to not be weary in well-doing, and just wanting to end with scripture 13, 1 Corinthians 13:13, that says the three things will last forever: faith, hope, and love being the greatest of all. And I think with the deep and abiding love for our people, I don't want us to quit on each other. I don't mind uncomfortable moments. I think we're worth it. I think we need to lean in and figure out how to serve together in love so that we can create something that looks like us for us. And yeah, so I want to end with that. I think love is the way to go.
So as you're going back in and leaning in and listening through the chat that we just had today, if you see tools, resources, books, different things that you all would like to drop in those spaces in the chat, please feel free, you guys, to drop that information in there, especially when it comes to the learning and the history of the church, the history of our community. Right now, we're reading through a book called
How to be.
How to Be an Anti-Racist. And so it's an amazing book, just getting the tools that you need in order to learn how to do the self-work. I cannot do the work looking at others. And so keeping in sync with scriptures, when it says that I need to first remove the plank in my eye before I try to help someone deal with the speck in their own. A lot of people, kind of come at me in different ways because I like to look at a bigger picture. I cannot critique, and I don't feel like the church, to be honest with you, needs to defend itself. I just think that church needs to just serve, and as long as the church knows who it is and how God has called it to be, the church never needs to defend itself, because the church, to me, is a byproduct of God, his extension of love in the community. So that being said, when people have question or issue with the church, before we can even start dealing with that, let's deal with our own anti-Blackness. How is it impacting us? Because I can't truly look at my brother or my sister in the true expression of love. I can't even see them clearly until I clean the lens of my own glasses when I look at my own self in the mirror. How can I say what it is that I need from you? And how can I say how I need you to show up, men and women of faith, if I don't even know who I am and I don't know what I need? I cannot ask you to show up and give me what I need if I'm not sure what I need, because I'm not sure who I am or whose I am. So for me, that's the last thing that I would want to leave in wisdom. Do that hard work within yourself. Learn who you are and whose you are in order to make a demand on what it is that you want to advocate for. So that when I ask someone to show up on my behalf, I'm knowing how I need them to present, how I need them to come. So I love y'all so much. Facebook, we are going to go off of live stream now. And so y'all just kind of wave to the folks. I want to thank the panel, you guys, for coming together. This was for sure. Ooh, deep water. And you all are the right ones. I appreciate you guys saying yes to the call, because this was not some easy call that you said yes to. And thank you for continuing to say yes every day and keeping into that fight.